Welcome to another episode of Queer View Mirror, a show about queer people, by queer people, for queer people, and our allies. I am Don.
And I'm Scott. Today we are being joined by Andrew Beckerman, and we're in beautiful downtown Victoria. Andrew is a philanthropist and an architect. And Andrew, where are we today?
We're speaking to you from the unceded territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, specifically the Sanghees and the Esquimalt Nation, which finds us just over the Blue Bridge from the downtown in Vic West.
Beautiful. And it's a beautiful day. So before we get into the interview with our dear friend Andrew, I gotta say this. This is Queer View Mirror coming at ya.
We had the great fortune of meeting Andrew at the Queer at Sea exhibit put on by the British Columbia Maritime Museum. And after chatting with him for 5 minutes over some bubbly, we realized we needed to have him on the show. Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Well, first I'll tell you a fun fact about the BC Maritime Museum, because if the legislature finally gets its act together, the permanent location is going to be right across the inner harbor from my apartment in the former BC steamship terminal.
Oh, how fitting.
That work is underway finally, which has the advantage of being on the harbor, which is how the colonialists arrived here and encountered pre-existing First Nations people who were already on the water themselves.
I see. So I'd like to put the interview in sort of like a context, and I would like to, you were featured in this beautiful magazine of SFU, and I would like to start off the interview with this quote. I want to give as much as I can so that young people can go where their passions take them, just as I have. Andrew Beckerman.
Gibson's Fine Linens presents the 5 greats of a 5-star bedroom. Great comfort, great quality, great value, great style, and a great selection. Create your own 5-star experience in the bedroom with Gibson's Fine Linens. They're not just good, they're great.
Andrew Beckerman.
I went to graduate school for my architecture degree at UC Berkeley, and I was enrolled at the time when the former governor, Pat Brown, had embarked upon an experiment to boost the California economy, which involved keeping student tuition at the very large UC system artificially low, which meant both myself and all my peers, and actually a group of us for almost a decade, we graduated without student debt. And so rather than going to work in places we didn't want to, but might make more money, we were able to go where we wanted to. And in my case, it was the beginning of a long career in not very well paid, but quite fascinating community-based design work. And unfortunately, I have been unable to convince the legislature that keeping tuition low for post-secondary graduate students here in BC, we're actually making an investment in our economy. They just don't have the subtlety of thought to appreciate that, nor the experience that I benefited from. So I am now providing scholarship support to students at Simon Fraser University. That's the article you just alluded to. There was another profile about my student support. Royal Roads University, this last summer, and I also support the program for transgender people at the University of Victoria, and a scholarship award which I fund. It's called Inspiring Community Leadership. And although I fund it, it's actually named each year for somebody who inspires me. This year, coincidentally, it was named for my young colleague, Andre Marti. Andre and I both won awards a while back at National Philanthropy Day. His was the 5 to 11-year-old category because he was 9. Mine was in the 18 above category because I was older, but we've become good philanthropic friends, and Andre was the name that went on the Camosun College Fellowship this year. And Andre, thanks to a nomination prepared by me with just rock star letters of support from Craig Smith, who's the ED of the Helpful a Dream Foundation, and Ali Daw, our mutual contact at Camosun. Andre recently received a British Columbia Medal for Good Citizenship, which is a medal I had won 2 years ago myself. And once you win it, they lean on you to provide candidates, and I'm lucky. I've got a whole trench of candidates I can nominate till the cows come home, because I've been able to work with a lot of amazingly generous people who share my interest in moving Canadian society forward for everybody.
So was there a point, we talked about your early years at UC Berkeley and some things that had happened, but was there a point where you realized, was there an aha moment, I guess I should say, about your gift giving and your philanthropy? That what made you want to give back the way you do?
Well, it was a much after the fact aha moment. It certainly didn't happen at the time, but a lot of the money that I brought with me to Canada, which is great. I'm one of the few Canadians who actually likes the fact that the loonie is always swooning, because it means that the US dollars that I bring up that I use for charitable purposes, are currently not worth $1. They're worth $1.34 Canadian. So it's a big boost thanks to the sorry state of our loonie. In any event, a banker gave me a tremendous favor when I was a graduate student. I didn't have much of an interest in being a homeowner because I was living in a comfortable house with a group of friends and paying $50 a month for my own bedroom. But I wanted carpentry experience, and it was a standard catch-22. One couldn't get carpentry experience until one actually had carpentry experience. And I came up with this idea, which, if I thought of it today, we'd call it a business plan, but the term didn't exist. And if I could buy a house just south of the campus, which the city of Berkeley had zoned for backyard cottages, my classmates and I, with a little bit of money for materials, could build a small cottage, and then some of them at moderate rents could rent the 3-bedroom house that I had just purchased, which had been built actually during the 1906 earthquake. And I'd probably gone into 4 dozen banks and savings and loans back in the early 1970s. They were as ubiquitous as coffee shops on downtown intersections. And a banker gave me basically a 99% loan, even though I was a graduate student who only had $1,000 in the bank and was washing dishes 2 nights a week. And so I bought the little house for $21,000, and he kept $7,000 back. And over the summer, my friends and I built a little 400 square foot cottage, which is still standing today. And I moved in for the fall term, and 3 of my friends, fellow students, moved into the house in front of me. And it was 1972, and it was before the California real estate boom. And, 50 years later, here I am in overpriced Victoria, and sold the one house I built here, and have a lot of resources to give to local charities for people who didn't get the kind of breaks I did. So that's one half. The other half is even more ridiculous in that the first computer drafting program called AutoCAD, developed by a company in Sausalito in the San Francisco Bay Area, was only developed for Apple computers. So I went down to a big Whole Earth Access catalog store in Berkeley and placed my order. They were like this, and they took 2 weeks to build. And the computer salesperson said, Andrew, if you like these Apple products, I can have a salesman here and you can buy shares when you come and pick it up. So I said, okay. I'm not sure I knew what shares were at that point, but I came back, the computer showed up, I paid the half I owed, and bought, thanks to the broker, 100 shares of Apple computer stock for $30 a share in 1989 or 1990. And they went into the US equivalent of an RRSP, called an IRA. And since one can't spend the money until one is much older, I didn't notice it or even pay any attention to it until I got to Canada, and that was, 17 years ago from right now. And a friend in the locker room at the Y who worked for an investment company offered to be my investment advisor. And I'd not had one before, but I agreed, and I gave him a list of my assets, including the retirement fund. And he calls me up. He said, boy, you have a lot of Apple computer shares. I said, oh no, I only have 100. He said, you're an idiot. I said, why am I an idiot? He said, you obviously haven't been paying attention. While you've been snoozing, Apple has been splitting, and you have, I don't know, 2,000 shares of Apple computer stock, and they're worth, $125 a share today, which, is pretty funny considering I'd only paid $30 a share for 100. And even since I have been apprised of this fact, Apple has split twice. Once I got 7 shares for each share I had, and then the second time, more recently, I got 4 shares for each single share I have. So I have, in the last 5 or 6 years, I have 28 times more Apple computer shares than I had just before then. And it's like I keep giving them away, but I can never get to less than 2,000 shares, which is where I'm at now, because it keeps on splitting. And it's great because since it's in a retirement account, by giving it away, I don't have to pay any tax on it, which you can imagine would be tremendous, because the basis of, $500,000 worth of Apple computer shares being only $3,000, that's a very big tax. But giving it away here. So those are two big favors. And without them, I would certainly be speaking out, but I wouldn't be able to be in a position of actually doling out.
Everyone with a phone can take a picture, add some text and captions, and post it on social media and get some engagement, and that's a good thing. But you're not everyone. You are an entrepreneur, a business owner. You want to engage with your customers and connect with your audience. You want to show them how you can serve them in the best way possible. Posting video content about your business will do just that. However, the reality is, creating video content for social media can be quite daunting. We are here to help business owners like you create a social media video marketing plan that will get the results you want. It all starts with a plan. Click on the link below and let's work on that plan. That's wonderful.
Yeah, a great story for Canada.
Well, earlier you also shared a story about how it all started with United Way, that being the first recipient of some funding.
Yeah, United Way of the Bay Area, one of the largest in the United States, was where all positive change and new ideas came from. And they had a non-discrimination clause that included sexual minorities. And I had been working as a staff architect at a project called Independent Housing Services, which provided home modifications for people with physical limits. And part of our money came from United Way. And that's where United Way looked for volunteers. And I started off reviewing senior centers, site visits, and was invited to join the board of trustees, and a small group of us, less than 10, who were all sexual minorities, asked the board of directors to question the Boy Scouts of America. Each county, and I think that United Way had 7 counties, had their own troop, and they were notoriously homophobic. And by asking them would they change their intake and their declining, we moved to have them defunded, which after a bit of backing and forthing was successful, and ended up meaning not only did the Boy Scouts, who were a product of conservative Christian churches in the United States, not the benevolent Boy Scouts of Canada without that toxic affiliation, led to, in fact, the United Ways everywhere in the United States defunding the Boy Scouts, municipal governments that gave troops free meeting spaces followed suits, and ultimately the Boy Scouts of America declared bankruptcy, and thankfully they no longer resist, so they're not discriminating against what they referred to as gay men and youth.
Wow, discriminating and exclusion never pays.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you had a hand in this. How wonderful.
Yeah, I was one of a group, and I have to say my partner in making the presentation was a far more illustrious American than I ever was. Her name's Roberta Achtenberg, and she eventually became an undersecretary, assistant secretary in the presidency of Bill Clinton.
Oh.
Real talent, lesbian lawyer.
Excellent. That's great. So what's on your agenda now? What are you working on, and what gives you purpose?
Well, I support about a dozen and a half annual match challenges. So any organization, a charity or post-secondary university, I give $500 or more to, I ask them to find other donors to match me. And according to Dave Obey, the publisher of our local paper, the Times Colonist, and I'm tired of arguing with Dave, so I just accept when he says. And thankfully, when Andrew Beckerman came to Canada, he brought matching challenges in his suitcase. And I get credited with that at least once, twice, 3 times a year, because at the beginning of December, end of November, I start a series of $500 match challenges for Dave and the Times Colonist Christmas Fund. And every couple of weeks, Dave has to remind people who they're coming from and put my name out there for people in case they've forgotten. It's great PR, and it's very funny because Dave and I have actually not met in person. In fact, we haven't even spoken on the telephone. Our connection is totally via emails, but we have a mutual admiration society, and I appreciate him, using my name to get people to pull their checkbooks out.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned something a while ago, earlier, that you're involved with something with SFU and UVic. So can we talk about something with SFU first?
Yeah, I support now 3 different professors at the Faculty of Health Sciences. One of them, Don McPherson's about to retire, and I knew Don before I knew about SFU because Don collaborated with what's now called the HIV Legal Network on presentations, first international and then Canadian drug policy summits. I'm a long-term donor through a match challenge named after my dad, Charlie's Challenge, at the Legal Network, and I met Don at one of our presentations and started providing support for his graduate students at a health summit that's held in Vancouver every fall. I cross paths with somebody I had seen at previous conferences but had not met, Travis Solway. And coincidentally, Travis and I both went to the University of California at Berkeley, and I've supported Travis's graduate students who most recently worked on the language for the Canadian ban on conversion therapy, which passed Parliament the year before last with an unanimous vote. I've never heard of anything passing in Parliament with a unanimous vote.
Bravo.
And I've just started working with a 3rd professor because I had a very good friend who was abused as a child and became one of the many people who sadly exist in our community who self-medicated the chronic heavy burden of the post-traumatic PTSD of that childhood abuse. And despite our provincial government being as proud as it can be about itself, when they created a ministry for mental health and addictions, all they did was take programs from a bunch of silos, move them into a new silo, and as far as I can tell, the only thing that has changed is every once in a while, when the music stops, there's a new name who's the Minister for Mental Health and addictions. Nothing they offer at present actually addresses that PTSD with any great level of success. So a third SFU Faculty of Health Sciences professor is working on hopefully what will be a successful treatment pathway that will be named in honor of my friend Tim, because he sadly died last December along the Lochside Trail.
So sorry.
You're also involved with something with UVic, and they have an event coming up that you're
That's
supporting
true.
as well.
Yes, the biannual Moving Trans History Forward Conference. It's the only international conference by, for, and about transgendered people. It is under the leadership of the incredible Aaron DeVore, UVic professor who's in charge of the program for transgendered students, and is responsible not only for the conference, which is coming up at the end of March, but also for the fact that UVic has the largest archive of materials related to transgendered people in the world. It sits in the general, as part of the general UVic archive under the main library. And the program, the conference, the archive all come from my incredible friend Aaron DeVore, and I support both the program, a graduate student or two working with Aaron, and then every other year I support with a third $5,000 match challenge grant the conference itself, which, as I said, is the only one in the world. And last week or so ago, there were already 250 people registered from around the world, and the conference is not for another 6 weeks, so that those numbers will increase. And when it happened last pre-COVID, I did meet people from all around the world, both as fellow delegates, as I was, to people who led programs and gave talks and helped educate the community. Yes, it's a big deal because it's the only program for transgendered studies at a university in the entire world that's here in Victoria.
Yes.
Good for us.
Yes, indeed.
And we were so excited. We were fortunate enough to have Dr. DeVore on the show a few months ago where he joined us and talked all about this conference. So we're super excited to be able to go.
And we're going to be there too.
Yeah.
Come say hi.
Yeah. Well, the world's going to be there, eh?
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely. We are really looking forward to that.
Yeah. And through, I always joke, it's a gift of part of my welcome basket, welcome to Canada. It's my ability to scoop up scholarships, mainly from the Public Health Agency of Canada, that have sent me around the world, around Canada, I should say, not around the world, to attend both the annual Canadian research conferences about HIV, Canadian Association of HIV Researchers, CAR, and more recently, I received a scholarship from the Canadian government to attend the first full in-person International AIDS Conference since COVID, which welcomed 10,000 delegates to Montreal, which was the first time I had been to one of those. And by the strangest of coincidences. I was questioning a panel after their presentation. I always have something I want to ask or say, so I know to sit myself right next to a floor mic. And the question was about whether they had any HIV positive people on their staff. And sadly, the normal response to that is no. And I offered some words of encouragement to employing an HIV positive person, although I wasn't volunteering myself, because it would really enrich the work they were doing. There was a reporter for the parent of a journal called Plus Magazine, which is still distributed in print as well as a digital copy, both in the United States and Canada. And much to my surprise, and those of my fellow peers working in the community who do much more than I do, found myself on the list of Plus Magazine's 10 most amazing HIV positive people for 2022. Thank God the year's over. It's going to be someone else's turn, and I will go back down into the muck of history in an anonymous sense.
What an honor, though. And, that's just wonderful.
Well, every time I get one of these honors, and, I think that I've gotten 6 awards or medals, which is funny because I've only been 17 years a Canadian, or one of these write-ups, we're able to piggyback on it and use it in basically begging letters to other people to support either the charities that are floating the profiles or to generalize it to other charities. And although you and I don't readily appreciate what MGBCM stands for, if I write it out under my name rather than just putting the initials at the end of my name, which I'm now authorized to do, it says Medal, British Columbia Medal for Good Citizenship. And that apparently has a salubrious effect on the propensity of people to write checks. We saw it most actually because it was linked to an appeal from the HIV Legal Network, and people who gave X amount of money the previous year, doubled there.
Wow.
And there was some research done, and yes, the fact that the province gave me, the challenger, a medal got people to write more and larger checks. And since the opportunities in my life to walk around with a medal, and it wasn't only one, it was a big medal with a ribbon, a miniature version with a ribbon, and then the little round pin you stick in your lapel if you have one. Hoodies don't have lapels. The only real value is using it in more fundraising, which is probably what one gets the medal for in the first place, because you never nominate yourself. That's not considered good form. But they're all given for volunteering, donating, helping one's community without any expectation of reward or award. And since I really didn't even know that a BC medal for good citizenship existed before I got one, I certainly wasn't, giving away money or donating time speaking and advocating to get an award, because it didn't exist in my world.
Well, thank you so much for all you do for for Canada, for being such a wonderful citizen. Thank God you're a citizen of Canada now.
Well, I think, unlike many of the refugees and immigrants I meet, we are so happy to be in kinder and gentler and safer Canada that instead of counting sheep at night, if we can't fall asleep, we think of ways to repay the hospitality of our country. And I close a little award speech a few years ago that just came to me. Again, another gift from my welcome wagon. These things just pop into my head. If cheerleading for one's country were an Olympic sport, I would be on the podium for Canada. Seemed reasonable. Now, in the audience was one of the Olympians I know, because a lot of them live here because they trained here in Victoria thanks to our climate. And the very tall and very blonde Adam Creek, who had been the co-captain of our Olympic team in 2008, captained the men's 8-oared shell to a gold medal, came up to me and paid me the highest of compliments. When that becomes an Olympic sport, cheerleading for your country, don't let anyone else nominate you except me.
Oh, that's very nice. Well, Andrew, our BC recipient of the, sorry, what was it again?
Medal for Good Citizenship.
You know, how much of your work that you do is literally behind the scenes. And, you know, it's nice to hear that you're getting some recognition for all of this. You know, it's very gratifying.
Yes.
Well, and again, you know, since I'm not applying to become, you know, Premier of British Columbia, and I've got a few choice words I could say about Mr. Eby in the context of charitable giving. You know, it really just is useful in getting people to step up and join me. And we are, as a country, very generous, because we recognize the government, the present government, is well-intentioned, but they're not as effective as needs to be, and you know, people like us make up the difference, which is an honor and a privilege, I think.
Yes, Scott's premise every time we do an episode is, what are you doing to make the world a better place?
Yeah.
And I guess we have a very good answer to that question today.
And, you know, that poor refugee dog suffering for months at the Port Angeles Animal Shelter, now a Canadian canine citizen, thanks to my dragging her over on the coho. What a gift.
We're going to get a video of Mabel that Andrew's referring to, and we're going to definitely put it on the shot. Well, I guess it's a wrap.
That's a wrap today. Thank you so much for having us in your lovely home and for having a conversation with us. And we'll check up on you again in a few months and see if there's anything you want to share with our audience.
For sure.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us today at Queerview Mirror. We'll see you at our next episode.